What's going on, everyone? My name is Burke, bringing you the Week 10 Power Rankings for PICA. This is the second to last week that I will be doing the Power Rankings. Unfortunately, this week, my co-host Xavier cannot be here. We had some scheduling issues and needed to record, and we couldn't get our times to line up. So, it's just going to be me today, which means that this Power Rankings is going to be kind of short, because there's really not too much to talk about this week, besides the fact that the 6 teams that are going to be making to the playoffs have been decided based on how this week went. It's not certain who has won each conference and who's going to be playing who in the playoffs in the first round, but as far as who's going to be making the playoffs, that has been decided. So let's just jump straight into number 12, and I'm not going to be talking too much about the teams that are lower on my list, just like last week, because there's not really too much to say about them. So anyway, number 12, I have the Manhattan Manectrics. Again, not too much to say this week. They lost again to the Chelsea Shandies. They played a good game, but their season is done. It's been done a few weeks ago. Just like before, and I've said before, their team is the weak point. He's a good battler, and it seems like he's playing well, but that team, it's just not. There's not much offensive synergy. There's great defensive synergy, but unfortunately, I think he's a little bit more of an offensive player, and that shows. So I don't really have anything to say besides that. He lost 3-0. It was a good match, but a loss is a loss. Anyway, moving on to number 11. This also shouldn't be a surprise. I have the DMR Shadow Absols. He also lost 3-0 this week to the Berkhamsted Bastiodons. Again, not too much to say. His team is also another very weak point. It's so incredibly offensive. He can't plan well to take hits for anything. It's not even like he's got really good bulky offense. Latios kinda. But this week, Latios can kind of take hit. Bisharp can take some hits. Slurpuff can kind of take it. Donphan's the only thing that's defensively that can take it. Galvantula can't do anything. Mega Sceptile just dies if it gets hit by a light breeze. And his season, just like the Manhattan Manectrics, it's been over for quite a few weeks. Not too much to say. I hope if they're still in next season that they, I think, draft a better team and are able to use it more successfully than they were this season, because they did do well in the last league they were in, but unfortunately, sometimes you don't do as well with a different team, and it doesn't look like he's been able to really ever use his team that effectively. Moving on. Number 10, again, this should also not be a surprise. I have the Middle-earth Magmortar. There was no battle this week between him and the Vespiquen Park Rangers. I think the Vespiquen Park Rangers are taking home a 6-0 win because of the forfeit. He's also been eliminated from the playoffs. Even if he were to win this week, because the Detroit Pincers won, he's also been eliminated from the playoffs. Differential's too great. He would have to... Even if he won 6-0 and the Detroit Pincers lost 6-0 this next week, the Detroit Pincers would still pull out ahead. So he is now also been statistically eliminated from the playoffs, unfortunately for him. And I've got nothing else to say because there wasn't a battle to talk about. Number 9 on my list. Moving on to... I have the Atlanta Braviary. They're a team that has now also been statistically eliminated from the playoffs. They lost big this week. And you look at the Braviary's team: Mew, Megacizor, Diggersby, Gastrodon, Rotom Heat, and Tyranitar. He's got so many things to deal with a physical Victini: Gastrodon, Tyranitar, Rotom Heat. Yet Victini just ran through his team this week. It did die, but got 4 kills. Shaman getting 1, Gliscor getting 1. His planning this week, I think, was definitely worse than he had been. Granted, he was playing against an extremely good team, and I'm not trying to take away anything from the Washington Red Shells, but I think his planning, not nearly as good. Maybe, he's experimenting a little bit because he's out of the playoffs now. It is what it is. His team, I think, was very balanced this week. He had a few heavy hitters, Megacizor and Tyranitar to be specific. Diggersby can hit kind of hard, but he didn't. I don't think he brought the offense needed to break through the bulk that is Mega Aggron, Gliscor, Blissey, and Shaman. That's such a hard core to break down. Granted, I think Mew with its coverage might have been able to do something, just because of Gliscor, 4 times weak to ice, Blissey, weak to fighting, and physically frail, although that HP stat is massive, and then Mega Aggron, kind of specially frail. So I think there is ways that he could have broken through that core with this team, because he is a team that can do a lot of different things, because he's got a lot of very flexible mons. He can do a lot of different things, and just this week did not work out for him. His planning seemed a little lackluster. His playing just as well. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that happens some weeks. But he has also been eliminated from the playoffs. If he is in next season, then maybe he can possibly make the playoffs then. But anyway, moving on to my number 8. And this is another team that has also been eliminated. Even with the 6-0 victory this week, because of the forfeit, the Vespiquen Park Rangers are at my number 8. Even with the 6-0 victory from the forfeit, they are still statistically eliminated from the playoffs. They can't make it. They are now, what is it? I think it's 5. They would be 5 wins, 5 losses. Not a bad ending. 5-5. He is at least broken even so far. There is still another week, and he has I don't know who he's playing. Let me just check. He does play the Detroit Pincers, so yeah, it'll be a good battle. Good battle next week. But he has been eliminated. His division is the Ruby division, which he is behind the Berkhamsted Bastiodons and the Squim Malamar. Squim Malamar and the Berkhamsted Bastiodons both have 7 wins. He has 5, and with 1 week left to go, he can't possibly catch up. So unfortunately, he had been eliminated, I think, last week, because it might have been last week, but he has also been eliminated from the playoffs. And again, there's not going to be too much, and this is just going to be a really quick video, just because, I'm not talking to someone. But people are just... It's so clear-cut who's going to be in the playoffs that it's very hard for me to just really, talk about them. But I think next week it might be a little bit more of an overview of how they did each season and then their final rankings for the season. Of course, not counting playoffs. How they do during playoffs is kind of irrelevant to how the power rankings work. But we might have a little bit more in-depth next week, just because we can talk about how they did over the course of the season, each team. We'll see. I don't know. It depends on how we decide to run it. But anyway, that's the Vespiquen Park Rangers. There's no battle to talk about. There was a forfeit, so he gets the 6 home. He gets the 6 home. He gets the 6-0 victory. Not much to say about that. And even with that, he's still been eliminated, unfortunately for him. At number 7, now these next 2 teams, I was unsure where to put them, But basically, my top 6 are the ones that made the playoffs. My bottom 6 are the ones that didn't make the playoffs. At number 7, we have the Iowa Focus Energy. The loss this week has guaranteed that they are not in the playoffs. He does not have the differential. He is 6-4 with a +4 differential. He could win 6-0, and the Chelsea Shandies and the Washington Red Shells could lose 6-0 this week, and he would still be behind in differential, but his win-loss record would be the same as theirs. So he has been eliminated from the playoffs. He has had a really good season. He played very well. And this week was no different. He did play very well. He was playing against one of the best teams in the league, the Toronto Tyrantrums. And I think this match was a little bit hacksy. He did He did miss 2... He did miss 2 Zen headbutts in a row, which prevented him from killing the Vile Plume as early as it did, and it allowed the Metachamp to go down relatively early. And then at the end, the Mega Altaria was able to come in on the Iowa Focus Energy fairly weakened team, and it was able to then just get the 3-0. It was able to sweep the last 3 mons on his team and secure him the victory. I think the Iowa Focus Energy, they looked like they had the match. Weavile was putting in a lot of work, able to really wear down his team. And had it not been for the Zen Headbutt miss, it is possible that the Metacham could have gotten off prior damage on the Mega Altaria, and the Weavile could have killed with the Ice Shard, preventing the loss. But this is Pokemon. And not always the person who played better wins, unfortunately. And I do think he was playing very well. His team this week, I think he prepared very well. He was using Mega Metacham. Great. I love Mega Metacham in this format. A lot of people disagree with me, unfortunately, because of its kind of lackluster bulk and its middling speed. It's hard to use effectively, mostly because it gets outsped by a lot of really offensive threats, and it can't take the hits. But granted, you send that thing in, what switches in well? And the answer is nothing, because that huge power, base 100 attack, if I might be mistaken, it's a high base attack, and nothing really switches into it, and I think he might have been able to pretty much clean up with the Mega Metacham. Maybe if it had Bullet Punch, I think it could have taken down the Mega Altaria. And yeah, but it happens. It's unfortunate, and because of the loss, he was eliminated from the playoffs. Had he won, would he have made the playoffs? Not necessarily. It would make Week 11 more crucial for a lot of teams, specifically the Washington Red Shells and the Chelsea Shandies. They would also have to win this week, and I think the Chelsea Shandies next week play the Iowa Focus Energy. No, they play the Chelsea Shandies were the Washington Red Shells. So if he had won this week, and then he won next week against the Manhattan Menetrics, which I think he definitely could have won, and I think based on how the teams have been playing, should win. He would have then made the playoffs if he won against the Manhattan Menetrics, because either the Washington Red Shells or the Chelsea Shandies would have to lose. But because, he did take home a 2-0 loss, he does get eliminated from the playoffs. I think throughout the match he was playing well, but there were some questionable plays. Him letting his Fortress go down so quickly when he does. His opponent does have a Mega Altaria. I didn't really understand that. Yeah, it's not a great counter because the Mega Altaria can carry Focus Blast, and I would definitely not put it past the Toronto Tyrantrums to put Fire Blast on their Mega Altaria, because that's good planning. Or at least decent planning. But what can you say? He played a very good season, and next week I think he will take home a win, but unfortunately because of the differential, between him and the two teams above him, he will not be able to make the playoffs. So, now we move on to the three teams that did make the playoffs. And at number 6, I have the Detroit Pincers. Detroit Pincers do make the playoffs. They did get a 3-0 victory over the Squim Malamar, a team we've had, both myself and Xavier have had high on the list consistently throughout the season. Granted, not in the beginning. We were very unsure about them, but over the course of the season, he's proven how good of a battler he is. But that's not who I'm talking about. Detroit Pincers beat him, though. He brought the Mega Ampharos. Didn't really do too much. The Crawdaunt switched in and died. And it wasn't looking very good for him. But if you look at the Squim Malamar's team, what does he honestly really have for Slowbro? There's Mega Pidgeot with Hurricane, spammable Hurricane, and the Rotom Wash. And that's about it. And you can see from the teams, Slowbro didn't die, getting 2 kills, and Alakazam didn't die, also netting itself 2 kills. He used Alakazam very well. It's a Focus Sash, Revenge Killer, and he was able to take down, if I remember correctly, I don't remember correctly, but he was able to use both of them very well. Mammothspine also net itself 1 kill, didn't die, and the Heatran is, the Heatran did what it's supposed to do, basically, while the Mega Pidgeot then die itself. I have him at number 6, mostly because he did make the playoffs. I don't think he had nearly as good of a season as the other top 5, nor the Iowa Focus Energy. He kind of got lucky with his division, allowed him to make the playoffs. I don't think he's going to go far in the playoffs, unfortunately. He could. He definitely could. The winning against the Squim Malamar, that says, he is really competing hard and he wants to win. Can he win in the playoffs? Sure he can. I have no doubt that can happen. Do I think it's going to happen? Yeah. Now, I don't think it's as likely as some of the other teams that have been doing so much better in the regular season. But again, anything can happen in the playoffs. He's definitely not going to be his conference winner. He is a division winner, but he is not the conference winner. So he is going to probably have to play either the Berkhamsted Bastiodons or the Squim Malamar next week. Not next week, the final week. Depending on if who has the better differential and who wins. Both the Berkhamsted Bastiodons and the Squim Malamar play teams that have been pretty low on my list. Squim Malamar play the DMR Shadow Absols and Berkhamsted Bastiodons. Play the Middle Earth Magmortar. So it's all going to come down to basically who has the higher differential, I think. Granted, DMR Shadow Absols, maybe they win next week. As well as the Middle Earth Magmortars, maybe they win next week. But all that's going to change is who's going to be playing who in the playoffs. Not much else besides that. So this next week battle, I think the Detroit Pincers play the Vespiquen Park Rangers. It should be a very good battle. It does not matter at all. This battle does not matter for him in the very slightest. It's not going to change the fact that he's not going to become conference winner by winning this, and the Vespiquen Park Rangers are not going to make the playoffs by winning this. So it's a rather inconsequential match, but it should be a good one nonetheless. They're both very good battlers. Granted, neither of them have been having the season I think they wanted, but it is what it is. And the Vespiquen Park Rangers, versus the Detroit Pincers, I'm looking forward to watching that match. They both have very threatening teams, and granted, I don't know who's going to win. Maybe the Vespiquen Park Rangers get their last win in for the season, and then send the Detroit Pincers off into the playoffs with the loss. Or, maybe the Detroit Pincers want to really send a message. Win this next week strong, and then go into the playoffs strong. We'll see. It all depends on what happens next week. I think this week, I saw more of what was in the beginning of the season when he started out really strong in the beginning of the season. I mean, first week he gets a 5-0 victory over. He had the best victory that week. Not much better. You can't get much better than that, besides 6-0. But he does that first week, and then second week he wins, and then all of a sudden he starts falling away. And I think this week finally he started planning better. He played very well, and it's at least showing that he is at least back to capable of planning a good team and battling with the best teams this season. But that is going to be the Detroit Pincers. Moving on to number 5. Moving down one spot from last week, we have the Berkhamsted Bastiodons. Berkhamsted Bastiodons, they won this week. 3-0 against the DRMR Shadow Absolutes. There's not really too much to say about them. Kiram really showing that it is an underrated threat. Crobat basically outspeeds most of the the DMR Shadow Absolutes team. Able to take home 2 kills as well. Dragonite also being able to do something. And Mega Houndoom just died. Unfortunately, Mega Houndoom wasn't really able to show what it's able to do. I do like Mega Houndoom, and I hope he uses it well come next week and the playoffs. He is, as I said before, he is one of the teams that has made the playoffs. He is guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. Whether it is as his conference winner or as the wild card spot, that is to be determined next week, I think. Well, yeah, it's going to be determined next week based on who wins, who loses, and the differential between the two, because they are both 7-3. This is Berkhamsted Bastion and Squim Malamar, both 7-3 with a plus. Berkhamsted Bastions have a plus 11 differential, and Squim Malamar have a plus 8 differential. Very close, so maybe the Squim Malamar make it ahead of the Berkhamsted Bastiodons. Again, maybe not. Again, next week it'll just determine who's going to make the playoffs. But he has made the playoffs, and there's really not much to say about this battle. He's been planning well and playing well every single week, and he played against one of the teams that is not nearly as high on the list. He scores a 3-0 victory. Doesn't need anything outrageous. Just another victory in his under his belt. Makes sure that he's guaranteed himself a playoff spot, and he's going to move on to next week and probably win that week too. And if he wins that week decently well, he might be able to move up to his conference winner and get a bye for the first round of the playoffs. And that is always nice to get a bye for the first round. Guarantees yourself in the semifinals, but not too much else to say about him. I'm looking forward to his battle next week, and I'm looking forward to seeing how well he does in the playoffs. He's a very good team. He's proved that even a team that I looked at and I said I do not like in the slightest, I shouldn't say in the slightest. I like the things on his team. In the beginning of the season, I did not like how they meshed together. He seemed to have a lot of redundancy in his team, but he was able to use it the way he can and just really blow back a lot of people that we didn't think he was going to win against. And he's really proven that he is a top threat. He is only at number 5, but these top 5, they're aside from number 1 really, and possibly number 2, it's very hard to determine who's at what spot. They're all very close together. It's a very tight race for the top 6. So Berkhamsted Bastiodons doing pretty well, and I think they're going to go give it their hardest in the playoffs, and I think they're going to do very well. So moving on, at number 4, I have the Chelsea Shandies. Chelsea Shandies, they did pick up a win this week. They picked up a 3-0 victory against the Manhattan Manectrics. Not really too much to say about this game either. He's playing a team that is currently winless, and as far as, I don't like to say this, he was, to me, he was supposed to win anyway. So he wins. He didn't move down a spot from last week. That's just because another team moved up above him, not because he moved down. You know what I mean? Like, he's not moving down because he did something bad. This is the team that I thought deserved a higher spot as opposed to of last week. And the Chelsea Shandies have had such a great season. His team, he had a rocky start. His team it was so good. It was so good that I think it gave him, he has the tools to win, and I think he's been using it very effectively. This week was no different. Granted, he did change his team a lot. He dropped the Megazard X for a Mega Lopunny last week or the week before. I don't know how much I like that trade, but, you know, if it's going to work for him, it'll work for him. He also lost the Caldeo for the Thunderous Eye again. He picked back up the Thunderous Eye. I do like Thunderous Eye. I don't like to use it personally. I'm not very good with it. But it is a very good mon to use in this format. I think it's better than the Thunderous Therian. How much better? You got me. But the Chelsea Shandies, they've made the playoffs also. I think they guarantee their playoff spot. I think because of the Iowa Focus Energy losing this week, they have guaranteed their playoff spot. He's been doing so well throughout this course of the season, and I'm also looking forward to how well he does in the playoffs. Again, I don't think however well he does next week is going to determine anything. I think I think next week he plays the Washington Red Shells, and then I think in the first round of the playoffs he has to play the Washington Red Shells again. I think because one of them is going to be wild card, or one of them's going to be let me see. One of them is going to be the division winner. One of them's, and the Toronto Tarantrum's probably going to be the conference winner. And the Chelsea Shandies have won their division, and the Washington Red Shells I do not think can bypass the Toronto Tarantrums, although I could be wrong. They could. The Toronto Tarantrums have to lose this week, or not week 11, and the Washington Red Shells have to win week 11. That's it. It doesn't have to be even by. It could be a 1-0 victory for the Washington Red Shells and a 1 loss for the Toronto Tarantrums, and the Washington Red Shells bypass them. Do I think that's going to happen? It's not likely. Because the Toronto Tarantrums, they play the Atlanta Braviary, and I think the Toronto Tarantrums can win this week. But anyway, that's not who I'm talking about. I am talking about the Chelsea Shandies. And it's been such a successful season for them, despite the rocky start. They're now 7-3. Mega Lopunny did put in quite a bit of work this week, along with the Azelf. I'm looking forward to how well he is able to use a new Mega. He might have a lot of experience with Mega Lopunny, and if he does indeed have a lot of experience with Mega Lopunny, I think he can put in quite a bit of work. He did lose, looking at his team, because of the Mega Lopunny pickup. He does not have any Fire Stab anymore, which is unfortunate. That's always useful. But he does have a very strong Fighting Stab. He did pick back up Electric, a fast Electric type, which I think is a little more useful, although he doesn't have as strong of a Fire, Water, Grass core as he did. I really like the Mega Charizard X Tangrowth Slowking core. That is just extremely hard to break down. Tangrowth Slowking is just extremely good in its own right, and you factor in things like Snorlax, Bronzong, Quagsire, Mandibuzz. His team is just, it's got the right parts, and I think it can do very well in the playoffs when we get there. But next week, he does play the Washington Red Shells, and that is going to be a fantastic match. They are very good players, both of them, and they've had very good seasons, and they're going to be playing. They're going to be playing each other probably twice in a row. Back-to-back weeks. It'll be very interesting to see how that works, because very hard to win against someone 2 weeks in a row. But we'll see how it works. So moving on to number 3. Number 3, I have the Squim Malamar. They have moved down from number 2. They were number 2 before, but they did lose this week to the Detroit Pistons. Granted, the loss wasn't huge for them. They were guaranteed to make the playoffs anyway. But this week, his planning, I didn't like it. He brought Malamar. I think Malamar is just a bad Pokemon in general for this kind of format. The 4 times weakness to Bug really, really hinders it. I know it's his mascot Pokemon. His team is the Squim Malamars. He brought the Malamar. But looking at the other team, what is it really going to do? And the answer is not much. It's pretty much just going to die. When your opponent has things like Florges, like Alakazam, like Lucario, he's got a lot of things to really punish the Malamar, and he brought it anyway. I don't see what he was planning on doing with it, because it just pretty much died. It can't do much. Mega Pidgeot didn't nearly run through the team as it has in previous weeks. It only got 1 kill, I think, against the Heatran, because it had hidden power, I assume, ground or fighting to deal with it, or more likely hidden power ground for the Mega Ampharos and the Heatran. So it was able to take down the Heatran. Jirachi getting 1 kill, and Rotom Wash only getting 1 kill. I think the Jirachi just Energy Ball killed a Crawdaunt. That thing's dead. And the Rotom Wash was, I think, able to kill the Ampharos, or maybe it was the Rotom Wash killed the Crawdaunt with the Volt Switch. Either way, Squim Malamar, I wasn't as thrilled about their planning this week. And their playing seemed a little bit just off to me. They started out strong, but then their late game playing was pretty poor. They had very little ways to deal with the Slowbro, to deal with the Alakazam, and kind of to deal with the Mega Ampharos. I mean, he had the Mega Pidgeot, and he had the Gligar, but it's still a very difficult Pokemon to deal with, and I don't think he was able to deal with at least the Detroit Pincers' defensive core well this week. Once he lost his Rotom Wash, the Slowbro was basically able to just stay on the field, because he couldn't do much to it, and especially once Rotom Wash and Mega Pidgeot went down, his 2 biggest special hitters, Slowbro is just able to just take all the hits, and it won't go down. And it didn't go down this week. So hopefully this is not an indication of what's to come next week in the playoffs. Next week, the Squim Malamar do play the DMR Shadow Absols. I think they will. As far as I'm aware, they should win this game. He is one of the best teams this league. The DMR Shadow Absols, unfortunately, is not. So I think he's going to win this week. If he wins and the Berkhamsted Bastiodons win, he might be able to... It depends. If he gets a big enough win this week and the Berkhamsted Bastiodons either lose or don't get a big win, maybe a 1-0, he does get the bye. So this next week is just going to be important in determining, is he going to get a bye? But he is in the playoffs, and I am glad to have been proven wrong. I had him at number 12 in my post-draft power rankings. I thought his team was going to be bad, and despite good playing, I didn't think I was going to be able to do much, and he has just proved me entirely wrong this season. Going 7-3 so far, probably 8-3 for the entire season, is absolutely fantastic. And he is going to be in the playoffs. And I think he's going to be able to do well, like pretty much every team that's going to the playoffs. So, moving on to number 2, I have the Washington Red Shells. The Washington Red Shells pick up a big 5-0 victory against the Atlanta Braviary, really solidifying himself in terms of differential. He's at plus 21, and that's ridiculous. I moved him up 3 spots from last week, just because he's been on quite a bit of a win streak. I think this is his 4th win in a row. It is indeed his 4th win in a row, and he's 7-3. His losses were 4-4-2, and his wins were 2-4-5, 4-6-5-5. He has had the highest differential wins of any team, including the Toronto Tarantrums, who are only one differential ahead and another win ahead. And that's because when the Washington Red Shells lost, they lost pretty big. 4-4-2. 2 not that bad. 4-4 pretty big. When the Toronto Tarantrums lost, it was 1-2. But he doesn't get nearly as big of these, or as big of differential wins as the Toronto Tarantrums. But his season has been absolutely fantastic. I'm baffled how Victini got 4 kills against a team with a bunch of stuff that can stop Victini. He's been able to now use his team extremely well, and even looking in the beginning of the season when he's drafting like really good offensive threats, and then he drops one of his biggest offensive threats, which was the Greninja, and we're like, Greninja? Why are you dropping Greninja? He picks up Thunderous Tea, which is arguably he's been using that better, and he also has Starmie, so he didn't really need the Greninja too much. And he's just been able to use his team fantastic. His core this week was extremely hard to break down, just as it is every single week. Mega Aggron, Gliscor, Starmie, and Blissey. That is just as disgusting of a core as it is pretty much every week. And those that doubt Mega Aggron, I think I've been disproven at this point. It has worked extremely well for him. And the Victini picking up 4 kills against a team with a Gastrodon, Rotom, and Tyranitar, that's a good... He's been planning fantastic. Like, I've never had a problem with his planning. It's always been good. The only shaky part when it comes to him is his playing. But luckily, because he plans well enough, the playing isn't nearly as important because he can kind of pad how he plays with just having really good planning. But granted, he's also been playing well lately, considering he's got the biggest differential wins out of anyone. It's the biggest differential win. Like, it's so hard to to me, it's like, how is he getting these huge wins week to week? And it's his planning. He's just been planning extremely well, and he's making the playoffs. Unfortunately, he might not be the conference champion, just because he's right behind the Toronto Tarantulas that does have a win, one more win than the Washington Red Shells. But the Washington Red Shells. He's playing the Chelsea Shandies next week, and that is going to be an absolutely fantastic battle. If he can win that battle, and maybe the Toronto Tarantulas lose next week, then he will be the conference champion and get a bye this next week. Is that going to happen? I have no idea. But I'm looking forward to his battle. I think it's going to be fantastic. Keep up the good work. Maybe you can be another league champion at the end of this. Maybe win the playoffs again. If he does, good for him. But he's had a very fantastic season, and next week I don't think it's going to be any different. So, the last team, and at number 1, and I'm sure all of you are shocked to hear this, I have the Toronto Tarantrums at number 1 again. I think he's been number 1 5 weeks in a row now. Something like that. He picks up a 2-0 victory, a little bit of a hacksy 2-0 victory, but, and when I talked about this, the Zen Headbutt misses not killing a Vileplume allowed it to basically take down the Medicham. That, well, not take it down, but put it to sleep, which just cripples the Medicham because it's asleep, and the IO Focus Energy didn't bring anything with Heal Bell or any stuff like that, so can't get rid of the sleep until it wears off. But the Toronto Tarantrums, their team is so incredibly threatening. The Mega Altaria pickup dropping the Mega Diancie, that just really solidified how threatening, absolutely threatening this team is, because Mega Altaria is one of my favorite in this format. I think it's very good, very hard to plan for. It does need some support in terms of getting rid of steel types. And what better way to get rid of steel types than with one of the best trappers of steel types, Magnezone, which he has. And I can see him pretty much taking the entire thing. He's lost twice so far. It does not look like he's going to be losing again next week when he plays the Atlanta Braviary. I think he's probably going to win that battle. But this week, though, it was a little bit shaky. He was about to lose, but then got the 2 Zen headbutt misses, and it shifted the favor back into the Toronto Tarantrum side. He was able to pick up the victory. His planning, though, it's been so good lately, and basically throughout the entire season, that it's hard for me to be super critical about him, but this week it was, I think, very shaky. He didn't have very good answers for the Weavile. You look at his team, Landisarian, not a good check. Magnezone, not a good check. Umbreon, not good. Runoclist, not good. Vileplume, not good. Mega Altaria, not good. He did not bring really anything to do with the Weavile very well. Granted, the Weavile still went down, but basically anytime the Weavile came in, it was almost guaranteed to get a kill. And this is why I think his team planning not very solid this week. Granted, Toronto Tyrantrums don't have a ton of options to deal with it, but he does have a Blastoise, which does deal with the Weavile. He does have a Ferrothorn, which, yeah, I know it does get low kick, but Ferrothorn's a Ferrothorn, and it's extremely physically defensive, and it'll be able to take the hits. So he did have ways to deal with the Weavile, but he chose not to bring them. Luckily, he was able to still pull out a victory, but that was, I think, extremely shaky planning on his part. And hopefully that doesn't happen in the playoffs, but he still was able to pull out the win. He is obviously guaranteed to make the playoffs. I think he was guaranteed last week, too. So he is guaranteed to make the playoffs. He might not actually have been guaranteed last week. It was really, really close. But because of his win over the Final Focus Energy, he is guaranteed to make the playoffs. And I think he's going to go really far. If he wins this next week, then he is the conference champion. He gets a bye week 1, which is always nice to have. And I think he's going to... I can see him taking the entire thing based on how dominant he was in the regular season. Granted, that's not always the case. You can always lose a battle early on in the playoffs. But I don't see it as likely of as an option. And he's been playing so well, and this week, granted, it was shaky, but I still think he is the best team in the league for the regular season, and he's just doing so well. So extremely, out of everyone, he's been the most consistent and the most dominant out of all the teams, and he's been able to just get consistent. They don't have to be the highest differential, but he does get the consistent wins, and that's good enough. But anyway, that is going to wrap up the Week 10 power rankings for PICA. Only one more week left. Hopefully, Xavier will be here next week to join me for the last power rankings of the season. We have our 6 teams that are making it to the playoffs. Who knows who's going to actually be able to take the wins and make it very far. Maybe it is the now underdog Detroit Pincers, or maybe it's just going to be the dominant Toronto Tyrantrums. No clue. They're going to be a very good playoffs. There's going to be a lot of great battles, and I'm really looking forward to them. But if you have your own power rankings, please leave them down in the comment section below. Please tell me why the 6 teams that are making the playoffs shouldn't be in the top 6. Tell me why the other 6 should be in the top 6. I don't know. But this season has been a great one, and even though the season is over for half the teams, they have, for the most part, played exceptionally well and planned exceptionally well, and it has been an absolute. It's been great doing these power rankings. Still have one more left, but that is all I got for today. My name is Burke. I'll see y'all next week.